Good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Amanpreet Bahati, and I am the Manager of Business Development with Edmonton Global. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that we are hosting this event on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional gathering place and center for trade for many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We recognize that inclusivity is at the heart of sustainable growth and understand that Indigenous partnerships and voices must be at the forefront of radical transformation for our region. Now, we have some great panelists presenting today, and they are joining us from the Trade Commissioner Service, BusinessLink, the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, and Edmonton Global's newly launched Global Growth Trade Service. Following these presentations, we will have a roundtable where you can ask some questions of our panelists. But in the meantime, feel free to drop any of your questions in our Q&A section. Now, every company's path to international expansion is unique, but we see three distinct phases that most businesses will go through to get there. The three programs that are presenting today are actually covering the supports that these phases cover. The first is the investigation phase, and you should see the slide right on your screen. This is the beginning of your journey when you are ready, when you're just starting to explore exporting. This is where BusinessLink's Export Readiness program comes in. The next phase is the planning phase. This is where you know what you want to expand internationally and are ready to build a plan to do that. This is where the Trade Accelerator program, or TAP, with the Chamber of Commerce is ready to help. And then the last is the activation phase. And this is where the Global Growth Trade Service can support you by providing a concierge service to help execute your strategy. It's important to note that none of these programs are prerequisites for each other. You can access any of these programs at the appropriate stage for your company. And in fact, we are actually very happy to refer you to any of the appropriate programs if we think you are a better fit elsewhere. So before we get started, I'd actually like to put up a quick poll and to share with our audience and see where you all are in your individual export journeys. So you should see the poll come up, and yeah, let us know. Are you in the investigation, planning, or activation stage? I'll leave it up there for a few seconds. Wow, I think that's great. It looks like most of you are in your planning phase, so that's really great. Thank you so much for taking part in that. So let's dive into our presentations. First, I'd like to introduce Peter Cahill, who is the Trade Commissioner Officer working out of the Regional Office of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. Peter, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Amanpreet, and good morning, everyone. As was just said, my name is Peter Cahill. I work for the Trade Commissioner Service, which is a service of the Government of Canada. We're part of a department called Global Affairs Canada. We've had a few names over the years, and basically the premise of our service is to help companies export, so it's export promotion, and the reason for that is that Canada is an export-driven economy. The kinds of things that we do, we help companies better understand foreign markets, perhaps navigate different requirements, regulatory requirements, that sort of thing, that are necessary to do business in these markets. We can help companies make connections, and sometimes we can problem solve. So the key asset that we have in all of this is we have a network of over 1,000 trade commissioners, the vast majority of whom work abroad in over 160 cities, in Canada's embassies and other offices.
That's great, thank you. So next, I'd like to introduce Audrey Allotey from BusinessLink's Export Readiness Program. Hi, Audrey.
I think I was on mute there. Well, thank you very much, Amanpreet, for having me today. Thank you, Edmonton Global, as well. So my name is Audrey Allotey, and I'm a team lead and a small business strategist with BusinessLink. So for those of you who don't know, BusinessLink is Alberta's small business hub. We are a not-for-profit organization that provides customized business advice and support for small business owners and entrepreneurs that are starting, running, or growing their business. And we do this by providing business advisory, one-on-one support, market research, and of course, linking businesses to other support services within the small business ecosystem. So moving on to my slide here on exporting. As Amanpreet mentioned, this is a program tailored for businesses, entrepreneurs at the beginning stages or investigation stage of the export journey. So those wondering if there's a market outside of their local market and how to go about tapping into that market. This program helps you from the point where you think, oh, I might be able to export, to actually thinking through the stages of exporting and developing an implementation plan for the next steps. To provide more details about the program, it's a 6-week one-on-one support that helps you navigate the exploring and first planning stages of the export pursuit. So this is a 6 one-on-one sessions working through an export readiness workbook with a dedicated export strategist. This means you get to work closely with one of our strategists to help you understand what exporting is, the requirement for exporting, and ultimately help you develop an approach to the process. So on the program, we help you develop an export business model or adding a component of export to an already existing business plan. Through that process, certain assumptions are made, and we help you to validate or test those assumptions by doing some bit of market research. And this is where we connect you to our market research department. We do have access to certain databases, including IBIS Vault, Hoover, SideStreet, and Veronix, Statista, et cetera, et cetera. So we're able to help you pull some report. And finally, we help you establish a market entry strategy. And this typically looks at how you are entering the market and what channels of sales you have in place. Do you have certain strategic alliances or partnership that you'd want to create? Or let's say if you have a product, do you decide to enter the market through agents or distributors and things like that? So we try not to overwhelm you because we all know that exporting can certainly be daunting. And we're trying not to get you to develop any sophisticated plan on this program. And that is what TAP is for, the Trade Accelerator program that my colleague John will talk about in a moment. And so most of the cases, once you're done with us, we'll move you on to that natural step if you want to develop a more, fleshed out plan. But the intention of this program is to get you thinking about the key aspects of exporting and doing business internationally and have somewhat of a draft or a blueprint to guide you through the process. So who is this program for? It is for businesses who have proof of concept and have done some market validation. So you have a product it's selling in your local market. You have an established product. So it's not just an idea, I want to start something. You do have a product or a service, or have seen some interest beyond your immediate market. Or particularly you have products or services that can satisfy foreign market need. So in terms of what you get out of this program, we'll get to that on the next slide. So the main focus of the Export Readiness program is to help you develop a market entry strategy, like I said. So this includes things like guiding you to conduct export and business assessment, understanding where your business is currently at, what elements can you add to make it export ready. And so we help you identify your market of interest. If you haven't thought of that, you're not sure what markets you're going to or what markets you probably will be able to help you narrow down into some potential markets. And then obviously help you conduct that market research. Once that is all done, we would like for you to develop that market entry strategy. Another two key components of the program is also to equip you to meet qualification criteria or referral criteria to other export services within the ecosystem. There's so much or so many supports out there, but sometimes if you've attempted that already, you realize that you may not be deemed export ready. And most of the time it's because you haven't quite maybe narrow down where you want to go and how you're going into such programs. And lastly, we also help you navigate through government support or funding programs. And so how to apply for the program is really pretty simple. If you go on our website, businesslink.ca/export, there's a intake form that you can fill out, or drop me an email at Audrey@businesslink.ca and I'll reach out. We'll have an initial chat to see where you fit within the export journey. And if you're not a good fit for this particular program, we are always happy to link you to the right resource.
Our next speaker will be John Gerum, correct?
Yeah.
With the TAP program at the Chamber of Commerce, the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your program and where it fits in with some of the other programs that we've been discussing.
Sure, great, Cheryl. Thank you very much. And thanks for Edmonton Global for the invitation. I'm the Export Program Manager at the Chamber of Commerce with the Trade Accelerator program. And we've been running this program in Edmonton since 2018. So let's take a look at a brief slideshow just to explain a bit about the program, and then we can do some Q&A later. So the deliverables of the program include a market entry plan. And what can companies use this for? They can use the, let's see if can we make the slide a bit bigger? My notes here. You can get financing from your bank, EDC or BDC. So it's really important that financial institutions see a solid market entry plan to be able to approve your loans. You can apply for government grants and programs. In fact, just this week, CanExport, which is a program that is run by the Trade Commissioner, open for grants and support. Obviously, with Peter and the Trade Commissioner Service, you can get support from them. If you have a solid market entry plan, what happens is the Trade Commissioner looks at graduates of TAP and they know that they're prepared for market. So they're really going to try to help you out and do the best they can to get you into market. You're going to be better prepared to expand into a new market. That's been proven over and over. We've had a couple of companies that have tried to export without a solid plan. When they come through TAP, they see much more success in the long run. And it also helps investors, distributors, partners, and employees understand and operationalize their export strategy, because you're not just running it by yourself within your department or your company, but you're going to use this to explain how you're going to get into the market and what your tactics and strategies are going to be for the long run. So let's take a look at the virtual program schedule and delivery. Next slide. Yeah, that's great. So we have 6 weeks that are delivered virtually. Day 1 is strategic planning for export markets. Day 2, support and advisory services. And here we have different government organizations come in and explain how they can support, whether it is with advice or financial assistance. Week 2, day 3, is legal and tax implications of going global. A lot of companies stumble with the legal and the tax applications going into countries. So you want to make sure you're prepared for that. Day 4 is international finance, understanding what that looks like and being prepared for it. Day 5 is building capacity and supply chain management. Very important that you ready your company and be able to understand the supply chain and how it's going to affect you. And that includes inbound resources and outbound resources. And week 5, day 6 and 7, we take a solid look at sales and marketing applicable to international sales. And in week 6, one of the great benefits of the program is mentoring day, where you'll be able to have a one-on-one 30-minute meeting with all the experts that have presented throughout the program. And they will review your export market entry plan to make sure you've identified or they've identified gaps that you may have overlooked when you were writing your plan. So what are the results of the program so far in Edmonton? Well, 55% of Edmonton graduates are actively exporting compared to 12% of Canadian SMEs. So that's a really important metric because obviously, as Peter was saying, we're a trading nation. We need to really improve our export capacity and export results. 20% of Edmonton graduates have entered new markets since completing the program. and 50% of graduates have hired new staff dedicated to export activities. These are jobs that have an average salary of $60,000 a year. So let's take a look at a short video of a TAP alumni and see what they have to say about the program.
Hi, my name is Nicole Porterfield. I am the VP of Marketing and Sales with Farm Fresh Pet Foods. Actually, a past alumni from TAP was talking about it. There's a couple of us girls that meet up and talk about business. And she had talked about having had done it and how it made her sit down and focus on doing her export plan. And we desperately needed to do that. So when you're running your own business, you're often running in the business, but you're not working on your business, and being able to carve out that time to actually focus on it. And that's what the Trade Accelerator did for us.
So we've seen a lot of success with TAP alumni. Some of them have done extremely well. Some of them have struggled a bit with COVID. But what we're seeing is that they're sticking with their export plans and they're still planning to export in the future. So that's great. So we do have a few cohorts coming up. One starts November the 2nd, and it's a virtual program for Edmonton and northern communities. We have a hybrid program, which means that some of the program will be in person and some of it will be virtual. That starts February 16th for Edmonton and northern communities again. And in the spring, we're planning a digital program for Indigenous-led companies that we will probably be working with Calgary ECDEV and their TAP program to deliver here in Alberta or Western Canada. So for more information on the program, you can contact myself or my colleague Shelley, who manages the Northern Alberta, Northwest Territories and Yukon area. And I'm responsible for Edmonton area and Central Alberta. There's our contact information. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you have any export challenges, we have a lot of companies and organizations in our network that we can refer you to. And I work closely with Audrey to make sure that any company that is export curious or ready to export feel that they have enough information and welcome them into the program. So thank you very much for paying attention, and back to you, Amitpreet.
Thank you, John. That was a great presentation. And thank you, Audrey, as well. I do apologize. I dropped off for a couple of minutes. It was a technical difficulty on our side. Thank you, Audrey and John, for those presentations. And like I had mentioned, if you guys have any questions for our presenters, please do enter them into the Q&A and we'll get to them at our roundtable. I'm going to move on to our last presentation, which is Cheryl Lockhart, who runs the Global Growth Trade Service program for Edmonton Global. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Amitpreet. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let you take over there.
Sure. So I want to start today by sharing the results of two studies that tell you why we started the Global Growth Trade Service. Because governments, economic development agencies, service organizations like my colleagues on this call have all been lamenting the low number of Canadian exporters my entire career. It's always been a push to try and get more companies exporting. And so the challenge is, well, what are some of the barriers to trade? And so the first study comes from Statistics Canada in 2017. And they asked exporters and would-be exporters what obstacles they face that prevent them from exporting or exporting more. And it shows that, yes, there are challenges with finance, regulations, payments, legal obstacles. But in my experience working with small and mid-sized businesses, the true challenges and the most difficult ones to overcome really relate to lack of management know-how at the top there, some identifying foreign customers or identifying foreign partners, suppliers, or distributors, and also lack of internal resources or capacity. And so I actually believe that these are underrepresented, and a lot of additional global research that we looked at in designing this program supports that as well. Because when we look at this study, exporters are actually self-reporting the barriers that they face. And quite simply, it's easier to point to external factors than it is to look inwardly at the company and the management team's limitations. And I really like that video that John just presented, where the exporter, she said, you know what, it forced us to take the time to really think about it. And a lot of exporters don't take that time. And the next study by ATB Financial further supports that assertion. So on the next slide, we see a study from 2017 that from ATB that asked business owners where they spend their time versus where they should be spending their time for the betterment of their business. And it also asked which aspects of running a business they find most difficult. And so what we see here is that in the time that owners spend is not at all aligned with what's most important. And it's human nature to spend the most time in the areas that they're most comfortable with, namely operations management in the yellow here. So the yellow is where business owners are spending most of their time. Blue is what is most difficult, and the burgundy is where they should be spending their time. And so you'll see in the second column under sales and customer acquisition, including international, that this focus on operations, again, the yellow bar, and to a lesser degree, accounting, is really to the detriment of sales and customer acquisition, which would be necessary for growing their business. And the third most important factor in their long-term success, and again, that's that burgundy column, is strategy and future planning, including export planning. Yet they don't spend enough time in this area. And in my experience, the time that is spent in this area is often ineffective. So what these two studies tell us is that business owners really struggle to allocate their time and resources and attention to the areas of the business that will have the greatest impact, generally because it's unknown or difficult to them. I think it's interesting to look at the last column there. We all know how challenging it can be to manage staff. That's the blue bar there. One of the most difficult thing, and yet it is where business owners spend the least amount of time as well. So that's natural, and that's sort of human nature. But that's one of the reasons why I moved into consulting, and that's why we created the Global Growth Trade Service. To really support companies to increase their focus on strategy and export planning and international sales to really make that impact. So John mentioned that after going through TAP, 55% of companies are exporting. My question would be, what about the other 45%? Sometimes they need a little bit of additional assistance. They need some help finding the time. And we believe that working with a coach will drive your attention away from the other columns, which are important, but probably some of them should be delegated, and into the growth areas of your business. So the result of our program, or the result of this research, is a 60-hour coaching program by myself and partially subsidized by Edmonton Global. And so for this pilot project, we're looking for 5 high potential companies to work with to help launch them into international markets. We are expecting a commitment of their time, so management time certainly, and the management team, but also a financial commitment to our fees and also implementing the export plan. And so if participants are interested, I'd be happy to answer some questions later on in today's webinar, or you can feel free to reach out to me directly as well. Thanks, Amanpreet.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was a great presentation. So now I'm going to invite our panelists back to answer a few questions at our roundtable. Unfortunately, Peter's audio or internet was not working, so he won't be a part of it, but we will share his contact information. So any of the attendees who'd like to reach out, you can. So the first question I have, I think, is quite a common part of conversation these days, and I'm going to direct it to John. Can you describe how and if COVID-19 has affected global trade?
Yeah, so what I do is I reach out to TAP alumni just to see how they're doing, and talk to a few companies in the last year and a bit. And it seems to be the number one concern is supply chain management. A lot of the products that they use to assemble things here in Edmonton come from Asia, from China, and there's been big disruptions there. And also interruptions with supply management to get to the products and services to their clients internationally. So it's quite a bit of a concern, and we're trying to focus on finding some solutions to those issues. But I think in the next year or two, it's going to be one of the biggest challenges we face as exporters.
Absolutely. And Cheryl and or Audrey, what are you seeing locally? Have you seen the same sort of issues?
Well, absolutely. I think it's generally slowed down, even people's interest wanting to export because of all that's happening. Governments shut down borders and all that, although it's slowly opening up. For businesses that are at the exploratory stage, some of them have had to hold back because they're not sure where things are going. But on the other side, I think it actually presents a great opportunity for businesses to plan. Because I think it was John and Cheryl who mentioned that one of the challenges we see with export businesses is just not making the time to plan. So I feel that the pandemic has presented a very good opportunity where there's a lot of time to just plan out, just do that due diligence, get information, access support services that are readily available to jump on board. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing from my end.
Perfect. And Cheryl, did you want to add anything in on that?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I saw a lot of uptick in people wanting to explore international markets, maybe not pursuing them quite yet, but knowing what's available.
Right. Okay, that's great. So we did have a question come in from the audience. It's from Kurt, who works in economic development in Canmore. And he wants to know if these programs are available to businesses there, so in Canmore, or are there equivalent programs run out of Calgary that he could recommend to the business community?
Yeah, so briefly, the TAP program is available in Calgary through Calgary Economic Development. And if you send me an email, I can introduce you to our colleagues there. So the way that the Trade Accelerator program works in Alberta, sort of Red Deer and North is our territory, and Red Deer and South is Calgary ECDev's area. So please get a hold of me and I can refer you to our colleagues there. They do a great job in Calgary and region.
Uh-huh. And if you feel you're not TAP ready and you want to explore the Export Readiness program, so BusinessLink, we have an Albertan-wide coverage. We're actually mandated to provide services to all businesses in Alberta, so not just here in Edmonton. And so we have clients from Canmore and so many other locations. We certainly will be able to help you. And if it's TAP too, then obviously what John recommended.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Audrey and John. The next question I'm going to actually throw over to Cheryl. So what are the benefits to companies who export, like outside of increased revenue and profitability?
I see that companies who are looking globally are more innovative. They're forced to look at things in different ways. And it's probably a little hard to quantify, but they just are able to elevate their game in terms of being more efficient on their operations. Staffing sort of improves that level of staffing as well. I know that when all of the information comes out on why you should export, it talks about, well, help Canada's GDP and promote diversification. And as a business owner, they're like, who cares? Like, that doesn't matter to me. I can expand into Saskatchewan. But quite honestly, it simply elevates the game of the companies that are exporting, and it improves their services domestically, because all of a sudden they're competing with other companies that are maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit more sophisticated, and it forces them to re-examine the way they're doing things within their businesses now into ways that are probably more efficient and effective. So it also improves their domestic business.
And Audrey or John, did you want to add anything to that?
If I can add to that, it also helps you mitigate risk of serving just one market. I mean, COVID has taught everyone that you certainly do not want to play in just one local area. You want to take opportunity of wherever there's a market or there's a need for your product. And so I would say it's that risk mitigation of not having to, lose everything all of a sudden, and just making sure that you've spread yourself in different areas and taken advantage of opportunities elsewhere.
Great. And John, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think, exploring the different markets out there is very important. And it's also good to do a lot of research before you put a lot of resources into one market. And we sort of help you sort of try to figure that out as we go through the program.
Great. Thank you guys for that. Now, Audrey, are there certain markets that you recommend a company should look at first?
Very interesting question. And so typically my first recommendation would be for businesses to first explore markets that they have some kind of connection or like existing or established contacts in. It's always easy to go into a market that if you've already been in that market or a country that you may have some market intelligence or know what's happening. So a typical example would be for a lot of the immigrant clients that I see. So immigrant looking to export their products or services, and they typically would want to look at their home countries, right? Because that's where they're from, they understand the market, they know what's happening. And sometimes you get real market information, not just what you get from the databases that we're able to pull out. However important those are, you find that you get information that sometimes are not captured in those reports. And so the first recommendation is start with where if you've traveled out to that place or you have some understanding of the clients there or their appetite for your product or service. My second recommendation would be to go to places that Canada has already established trade agreements with. So it's a lot easier, and that goes to talk about import regulations. If Canada already has some established trade agreement, chances are the regulations would not be here, right? And so that would be another one. And also you want to go into markets that you understand the political or even the economic factors, that you don't want to go into any market blindly. And perhaps lastly, I also recommend that sometimes clients, especially the kind of clients that we see with the Export Readiness program, they are certainly at the exploratory stage, right? So you're thinking, is there a market somewhere for me? Sometimes a very simple way to do is to look at your analytics, right? So your social media analytics, your Facebook, Instagram, just explore who is looking at your pages. Where are they coming from? Which countries? And that gives you a sense of, oh, maybe there's some interest to what I'm doing here, be it a service or a product that you have. It could be that there's someone in Japan who is much more, maybe a group of people in Japan always on your page. You certainly want to explore that deeper.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. And again, John and Cheryl, if you'd like to jump in on anything, that'd be great.
I just wanted to add to that. A lot of TAP companies, actually non-TAP companies, want to export to the United States. And that looks like a great opportunity. But there's a few things to consider. One is that there is going to be a lot of competition for whatever good or service you have there. And with that sort of, not so much now, but America First approach, it becomes a bit more difficult. So there's a lot of opportunities outside of the US, and a lot of TAP companies are taking advantage of that. So we have free trade agreements with Europe and a lot of countries in Asia and South America. And I would say, please look at those areas. And another important thing is, what is your differentiation in that market? Look at the competition in that market. If it's really strong and you have 3 or 4 companies already in that space, it's going to be very difficult for you as an exporter to get into that space. So there might be a few regions and areas around the world where you really have no competition and your product or service is differentiated enough that you can take that market share. So there's a lot that goes into selecting your market. A lot of companies that come into TAP want to, they say, oh, we're going to export to Europe, North America, and Asia. practically speaking, that's not going to happen. We want to sort of drill down into an area where you're going to have the lowest hanging fruit and be successful in that one market and be able to execute and then grow from there. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing right now.
Absolutely. And if I can add to that, I don't know if we have time, just a quick story here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did have a client because she's moved on to different things. So at the time, just as John mentioned, she was particularly interested in exporting to the US. And so she makes soap. And obviously, there's huge competition there. So I said to her, can we explore the market? Just start looking. I go ahead to look at her Facebook analytics, and it showed that she had some interest from Saudi Arabia and Japan. And so we started exploring those markets. And lo and behold, she actually had someone reach out to her from Japan to say, hey, we love Canadian products. Obviously, you want to take advantage of that great Canadian name. We know that anything coming from Canada is clean. So I said to him, maybe we don't stress too much about US. Let's just, divest a little bit and see what will come out of this Japan connection. And now she's exporting to Japan.
That's great. That's a great story. Thank you, Audrey. So we have another question that came in from our audience, and I think it's a good question for Peter, but I'm going to open it up, and maybe one of you guys, maybe Cheryl, if you want to take a stab at this. Has the recent political incidents impacted the trade relationship with China? And there's a second question. What is your outlook for future Canada-China trade relationship? I'll start with Cheryl, and then I'd love to get everybody else's input on it as well.
Sure. I think that's an incident that obviously has impact, but would tend to be a bigger impact on the really large companies and not the small and medium-sized businesses that we work with. In terms of my clients, I haven't had any of them report that that's a challenge. A lot of them import product from China, and the bigger concerns are supply chain issues more than anything, and logistics. And the political aspect has not impacted them, nor has it in the past. So for purposes of our audience, I don't see that. On the bigger scale, on the bigger picture and larger companies, Canadian canola exporters and things like that, when there's bigger dollar volumes involved, I wouldn't be able to comment on that specifically.
Yeah, I think, I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with Cheryl. At the micro level, sometimes you don't see it play out so the way you think, especially when it's all in the news. Particularly for our clients, it's not so much, it hasn't gotten to that level yet. Certainly it is at the macro level and all that political things. So the answer is, I honestly don't know. I always say it doesn't hurt to explore and do your research in the meantime. And hopefully there isn't any real policy that would stop the process. But I have an example I'm thinking of. I always hear Russia, but there are businesses in Russia and America, so you always wonder what happens. I always get surprised. I'm like, is it a no-go area? But you see that there are businesses happening between the two countries. So usually it's at that level, and we would hope it doesn't trickle down to that business level. Yeah.
Perfect. John, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, so business is business, and I think the Chinese understand that. So what I hear from exporters into China is that it's pretty well business as usual. But of course, you have to be careful because there's going to be tension. I think there's going to be upcoming tension between China and Canada in the near future as far as just political aspects of it. So the politics are sort of a bit different than the trade, because China and Canada realize that for their economies and for their people to prosper, we need that international trade. And that common sense sometimes is something that supersedes the political messages. So you hear on the media about, China and all that, but I think on the export side of it, things are still pretty good.
Thank you. So we had a couple of more questions come in from the audience. This one is, are there programs available that would incorporate synergies or partnerships with foreign companies to leverage export readiness and market penetration? Cheryl, do you want to take a stab at that?
I'm not entirely clear what the question is, but I think that that's the purpose of our program, in that every exporter enters markets in different ways, and there's different levels of partnership that you might have with a foreign company, whether it's just simply granting them a distributorship and then you let them run with it, or all the way up to a joint venture. And so that's what we would explore in the program, to try and find something that fits for you. And also fits for the foreign company, so that you are both working and growing together.
Great. John, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's always good to partner with somebody or look at some connections in that foreign market that you can leverage into that market. And I think that's where the Trade Commissioner Service does a great job. So I would sort of highly recommend looking at the Trade Commissioner and getting those contacts internationally. And also looking at other organizations that support export and export sales, like We International, which is a women's organization that supports export for women-led companies. So there are some organizations out there, and you definitely don't want to do this alone. You've got to find somebody in that market to help out.
Perfect. Audrey, I'll open it up to you as well.
Well, I agree with both Cheryl and John. You certainly want to do your due diligence in that, and making sure you understand the other foreign market, and you're working with a trade commissioner. And I guess for us, with the Export Readiness Program, we noticed that, well, the Trade Commissioner Services, although it's for every Canadian and all Canadians, sometimes their services is tailored, right? You need to, at least before you approach them, know how you are entering that market. So that's where the Export Readiness comes in, to help you decide what market is it and how am I entering? Am I going through with distributors, so that when you reach out to the Trade Commissioner, then you give them exactly what you're looking for and they're able to help you.
Perfect. Our next question from Lauren in our audience is, I'm interested in achieving a Made in Canada status. Can anyone provide a guide on how my company can attain this? So I'll open it up to the three of you if anyone wants to jump in.
So I think you have to be careful about Made in Canada. There's all sorts of regulations and exactly what components that are like imported from other countries that go into the Made in Canada label. And also you have to look at the origin certifications that you can get that proves that the product or service is made in Canada. But I would say that the Made in Canada is very advantageous, like Audrey said, for the Japanese market and typically the Asian market, where they look at Canada as being like high standards and great quality. In the States, not so much. So I have a quick story about that, was that a company was exporting into the States and putting that Made in Canada sticker on, and somehow these packages didn't get delivered on time and there was some damage to them and so forth. So they didn't put like Made in Canada sticker on anymore, and they were a bit more successful. So I don't know if that's true of the whole market, but you have to be strategic in what markets you're going after and whether that Made in Canada branding is going to be successful and how to leverage it.
Great. Audrey, did you want to add anything to that?
No, not really.
So what are some common mistakes you've seen companies make when it comes to expanding into international market? And I'll let Audrey start with that.
Okay, so first mistake, just not planning enough. And so I find that most companies do not take time to understand that foreign market of interest of theirs. And so they are either in a rush to just export because they think there's a potential over there without really understanding, doing their due diligence. And so just not taking time to plan, even if it's a 6-day program with TAP or a 6-week approach with the Export Readiness Program, what it does is it just helps you to develop that blueprint, so you don't go in blindly. You know what to expect. There are no surprises when you're going like, oh yeah, I saw that in my planning stage. And so you're not stressed, because I say to my clients, we don't want to stress. Stress will come, but you want to make sure that you have an idea of what you're doing, and you don't just go in blindly, because it is expensive to export. And so that's one of the mistakes that I see people make.
Perfect. And Cheryl, did you want to jump in?
Sure. From my perspective, that's certainly important, but having a good foreign partner can really help you navigate through some of that. And the mistake that I see a lot of companies making is not thinking through the process and what happens once they find a foreign partner. So how are they going to engage that distributor or that agent or whomever is working with them in the international marketplace? We all have been told that Canada has such a great reputation in international markets, but the fact is, in some areas, Canadian companies are seen as unresponsive. They're seen as slow or not cooperative. A lot of, as an example, agents in the Middle East, while difficult to work in that market in the oil and gas sector, I've heard they've written off Canadian companies as in representing them because they're not getting what they need to help the Canadian company meet their mutual goals in that marketplace. And so businesses aren't thinking, who's going to manage this relationship? Who's going to put the time into it? How do we educate them on our product and continue to keep engaged with them and check in with them on a regular basis? And I think that's where a lot of exporters fail. They sign up a distributor and they let them go. And then in a year, they're upset because they haven't sold anything, but no one's contacted that exporter within that year.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, those are two great points. But the other thing that I see TAP companies sometimes come in is lack of company capacity to export. Yeah. So they don't have a budget in mind, or they have a low budget, or they don't have the human resources that's going to be required internally within the company to export. They perhaps don't have the accounting and legal advice that they need internally to execute. And that's going to be really important to have enough human resources and capacity to actually execute that plan. We had one company that wanted to go into Japan, and their marketing budget for the whole thing was $5,000. Oh. That's not realistic. So having a realistic budget and a plan on cash flow and how that cash flow is going to affect your existing business here in Canada, all these things need to be figured out, because no matter what you do, if you don't have the financial capacity to be able to move forward with your export plan, at the end of the day, it's just not going to work.
Absolutely. And I think those are great points. And actually, I want to jump on one of Cheryl's points where you said having a foreign partner. How do you find that international partner, especially if you're in a market that you don't have a lot of connections?
The Trade Commissioner Service is a great place to start. Obviously, I've found that a lot of companies will have success in approaching trade associations, and maybe not just the members of those associations, but the board of directors who can provide a reference. What I've been having more success with lately is working with a contractor in the foreign market to start making some calls, because emails don't get answered, and just being very persistent on identifying who a good fit might be and trying to make that connection there. So, I get really kind of creative in trying to identify who's in those markets, because sometimes they're not easily identifiable.
Great. So we have time for one last question, and it's going to be for all three of you. How do you and the various stakeholders work together in this ecosystem? So Audrey, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So as part of designing the Export Readiness program, what we did was to connect with pretty much all the other service providers within the export ecosystem. One, it was to ensure that we didn't replicate what is already being done, and also to ensure that we understood all the different services and the qualification criteria, because as part of the design or as part of the Export Readiness program, we do hand over clients over to all the various programs. So we hand clients over to TAP and Edmonton Global Program if they're a good fit. And we also wanted to ensure that we weren't sending clients that weren't ready and could just not access these programs. And so with that said, we've worked very closely, and we have good relationship with all the service providers. We do warm referrals. I'm always chatting with John and the Trade Commissioner services within specific industry that my clients are into to make sure that, okay, can I send this client over to you? Are you able to help? And so, yeah, just making sure that that's a lot of synergy within what we do, because it's a journey, right? And we are certainly not looking to do all of it because it's so broad. And so we're just happy to do just a bit and move them on to where they would access the better help.
Great. And John?
Yeah, I look at it like Team Canada. We're all here to help companies export successfully. So networking is important, having great relationships, understanding all the different organizations and what they can bring forward, having a Rolodex of resources for anybody that comes in to ask questions about where they can get information or support from. So I think it's really important to obviously work with partners, Economic Development Canada, Bank Development of Canada, all the different provincial organizations, and Edmonton Global, of course. And I think the vision of, getting companies interested in export, getting them planning, and then executing through Cheryl's program is going to be key to really get companies successful in exporting. And I think at the end of the day, we all work together and make companies successful for their export activities.
Great. And
I don't
Cheryl?
have anything to add to that. That's fantastic. Yeah,
No?
I would just say it can be a little daunting how many organizations are available. And
Yeah.
so just reach out to any of us and we'll help guide you through that process.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're at the end of our webinar now. So thank you to everybody for